Price, you're going to get this next question. I'll begin
Okay.
with you. Does the ethnic studies have any place in the classroom in Arizona?
Well, rather than ethnic studies, I would say cultural studies, because I think that everyone should know what other cultures are like. But ethnic, when you teach advocacy of overcoming the government, that does not have any place in our school system. And foreign languages, Spanish is very important to me, and I speak it fluently. I think that cultural studies are very important, but not ethnic studies.
Ms. Dugan, ethnic studies in the classroom?
Ethnic studies, the way that it is being taught here in the Tucson Unified School District, should not be taught in that manner and not given the credit of U.S. history. Now, for the last 4 years, Superintendent Horn and I have investigated those courses. We have talked to teachers that were teachers in those studies. We have documentation of what went on. And when we are teaching our students that they are victims and are oppressed of this country, those are the curriculums that we need to get rid of out of our schools. And so I'm very much against a curriculum that teaches our students to feel that they are oppressed and victims, and then later on to be angry adults. It is my belief out of many one, and we're not teaching those students when we divide them up by race. As a Hispanic of Hispanic descent, I find it very insulting and very disheartening to know that we have a school district that divides students up based on ethnicity.
Senator Huppenthal.
Well, I took the time to actually go and visit an ethnic studies classroom, and a number of the things that I observed in there were very disturbing to me. The statements that our founding fathers were racist, made right while I was there, particularly Benjamin Franklin, of all people, who was perhaps the foremost champion of the First Amendment to the Constitution. They have this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. When you talk to the students, they're communicating this concept that they're being oppressed by a Caucasian power structure. And then perhaps the most troubling thing to me is they were glorifying Che Guevara with his poster up on the wall, someone who helped direct the communist death camps in Cuba, put over 14,000 dissidents to death for nothing other than First Amendment rights. And so I consider him to be an evil thug, and the idea that they would glorify him I found very troubling. So on a number of fronts there, I think that good teaching reaches out to students in inspirational ways. Every one of those students needs to know that our founding fathers, when they signed the Declaration of Independence, they were on a one-way trip. They were all consigned to be hung by the British if we hadn't been successful. Every student needs to know that. So I think ethnic studies, as they have it there, needs to be wiped out. It's not acceptable.
We'll begin with Ms. Dugan on this one about SB 1070. How is that going to change education in the state, if indeed it survives the court challenges? And were you in favor of SB 1070?
Well, it is the rule of the land, and I'm always a person that obeys the law. And how is it going to affect the schools? Students still will come to school. There is this law, federal law, called Plyler versus Doe. And as a public school administrator, we never have been able to ask students their citizenship. We are only to ask where the residency is of a student. So we will, I would imagine school districts are going to continue to do so. But I also know if there is some criminal activity that goes on in the school, they are to call the police department, as I did as a school principal, and then the police department take their lead from there. And that has always been done. But as far as SB 1070, I don't think there's going to be a lot of change as we have done in our school system before, except if there's criminal activity, the police department will take over from there.
Senator, were you in favor of 1070, and how might it change the education system?
Well, I felt for a long time that our illegal immigration problem in Arizona was out of control. When I saw murders in Phoenix peak at 250 in 2006, almost twice the murder rate of other large cities, you could directly see the connection to illegal immigration. I and Senator Pierce worked together to get illegal immigration under control. He's endorsed my candidacy. I've also worked with Sheriff Arpaio on the illegal immigration issues, as well as schools and jails. Russell Pierce, another issue that he works on with me is vocational education opportunities for our students. So I am a strong supporter of getting illegal immigration under control for a whole variety of reasons. It has disrupted the melting pot. It has caused large increases in our crime rates. We're slowly getting that back under control. We need to be very careful, though. The mission of our schools is to educate children, not the law enforcement issues should only be kicked in when we have disruptions in the schools.
Okay. Dr. Price, SB 1070, did you like it? Do you like
Well, I think it's the will of the people, and I think it is the law of the land. And they're tying that together right now in the courts. I think it's important that we think about the children, and that's what we're about in education, is how are we going to not separate families? So we need to think about that and to know in this immigration question how we are going to handle that problem, because we are going to be faced with that when students come through our doors.
Okay.
And we always have been.
Thank you. Senator Huppenthal, will begin with you. What separates your candidacy from the others running for state school superintendent?
I've always been able to make a difference. As a legislator, I have introduced and passed more legislation than any other legislator in the history of Arizona. Early on in my career, I confronted the teachers union and shortened the time to dismiss a non-performing teacher from 1.5 years to 90 days. That's just one example of many of where we've been able to put reforms in place. I brought performance pay to every teacher in Arizona, one of the few states to be able to execute that, where you have pay, a significant amount of pay tied to measured performance. A lot of the school districts don't do it correctly. We need some leadership in the superintendency to get that done. Performance pay is a critical part of an organization performing well. I have the background and expertise to done that. I've put that in place in school districts and brought them from average levels of performance to excellence. So I've got a track record of instituting reforms successfully and getting things done. Also, my legislation is used by all state agencies to help improve performance.
Okay.
One of the state agencies that does that least successfully is our Department of Education. Over 500 employees. We need them working on to improve schools and school districts.
What's the issue that makes you the right person?
Well, I have a plan, and it's found on my website, and it's moving students forward based on a curriculum, moving the curriculum forward and not the student. And by doing that, we should be able to have reading, writing, and math so that students do not have to be remediated at any other level. And we should be able to go with a career exploration and get them to go along career levels so that they don't have to be retrained if they get fired, so that they've got some other ways to go instead of a dead end.
Okay, Ms. Dugan, what separates you from your opponents?
Experience.